It is customary that we begin our meetings with a prayer. If you care to join us, would you please stand? Let's just pause.
Our Father, we thank you for our country, and we thank you for this great city and parish and for our state. And Father, we just thank you that you allowed us to be born in a free country where we can come and we can assemble together and we can discuss the business of our community and try to make decisions that are the best for everyone concerned. We ask you now, above all, for wisdom for everything that must be decided this day. In your Son's name, Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. First thing we'd like to invite everyone to do is to please turn off all cell phones while the board is in session. We have slips at the table at the speaker stand next to the podium if you wish to speak for or against an application. Please fill one out and place it in the box. We also have copies of the opening monologue, which provides follow-up information on the zoning process. Those copies are available on the table next to the podium and also in the entryway of this particular room. If you wish to comment on an issue that is not on the agenda, you will be permitted 3 minutes at the end of the voting on cases. If you're not sure whether the item you're interested in is included on today's agenda, please include this question on the slip that you place in the box. The staff will ensure that you're provided an opportunity to address the board at the proper time. We will call each case on the agenda in order and hear first from the applicant and those speaking in favor of the case. 10 minutes will be allotted for the principal spokesperson and 3 minutes for each additional speaker. We will then hear from those wishing to speak against an application. Again, 10 minutes are allotted to the principal spokesperson and 3 minutes for each additional speaker. One representative of the application can then speak in rebuttal if desired. Please state your full name, mailing address, and zip code before addressing the board. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the board will remain in this room to discuss and vote on each case. If you wish to remain, you're welcome to do so. However, because the board will be in deliberation sessions, members of the public are not permitted to speak during this time. A written notice of the decision will be mailed to all applicants. Any members of the public may request decisions and information on a particular case by contacting our office after 12 noon on tomorrow, or by accessing our website at ShreveportCattleMPC.com. All of our decisions are subject to appeal to either the City Council or the Parish Commission, depending on the location of the property in question. If your application is appealed or requires final approval by the governing body, you are advised to contact your City Councilman or Parish Commissioner at your earliest convenience. Please note that it is your responsibility to contact the appropriate governing body to inquire about the public hearing procedures as related to the matter you are concerned with. To contact the Parish Commission office, call 318-226-6596. To contact the City Council office, dial 318-673-5262. To contact the Planning Commission office, call 318-673-6480. If you're standing, we're going to invite you to fill in the seats that are available so that we can make sure that the fire marshal is not aggravated with our attendance today. Thank you very much. With these opening remarks, we will hear from the first case on the agenda. Acknowledgement of receipts of documentation showing the alignment of the access roadway from the Esplanade Development to Flonar Lucas Road as it relates to case number SP 1109 and P 3807.
Y'all got it on the seat. And there's the real bottom line. And he's the deputy secretary.
Andy Craig, Moore and Associates, 6025 Buncombe Road, Shreveport 71129.
Got an email from them, it's in here, Larry, I can't find it right now.
You'll see on the board here in a second here, the, a map showing the Esplanade subdivision. And as you know, this, subdivision of the Esplanade neighborhood was approved by this board for, zoning and construction back in November 2007. I'd like to give you an update on where we're at. If you're not familiar with where the construction is on the project, some of it's back in the back, it's hard to see. But units 1 and 2 that were approved by this board several years ago have been completely constructed. We have the streets, the drainage, the water, the sewer.
Andy, excuse me just a minute, we need maps up there
I think they're trying to load.
so that the audience will know what we're talking about?
I'll turn those on as soon as I get back in there.
Okay, well, that's.
We have a
we'll
hard
as soon
copy
as
when
we
Tim
can.
gets back.
Mr. Chairman, we may want to delay just a minute because
I got it now.
the audience is at a disadvantage if they can't see what we're talking about. John is in the process right now trying to get those turned on. There's one of them right there.
That's the project in its entirety there. As I said, units 1 and 2, down toward Railsback Road are constructed, the streets and all the infrastructure's in. We are in the process of extending the street to the north. Of course, our bridge over Bayou Pierre is there, has been there a couple of years. And we are probably 85% complete on connecting the water from Fort Lucas to Railsback Road. It is, the entire link is contracted, just not quite under construction yet. And the sewer is connected. And you see the 9-acre lake there in blue on the map to go with the subdivision. And if you've been over in that area lately, most of the improvements you can't see from the Florino Lucas end, even from the bridge. You have to go around the Railsback Road. So if you've been over there and it hadn't looked like much been going on, because it's all on the south
Andy,
end.
again, Andy, excuse me, Alan, would you move that map up a little bit?
I'm not in control of it.
Oh, you don't
It's on
have
their-
that? I was
It's on their PowerPoint.
John should have those on in just a few minutes. I think it's important, as Andy presents things, that the Railsback Road and Ellaby, go back the other way, John, or Tim, if you will. There you go.
Yeah.
Now you can show, I would point out Railsback Road and Ellaby. It's down, there you go, down on the bottom
On the
side.
very
I
south
do.
end. And the streets are constructed, the main drive there, the first cul-de-sac, second cul-de-sac, and then there's one a little bit off the picture there. About to where the picture ends, it's about where we're constructing the streets, the water and sewer. And from there, the bridge is currently under contract. So that's just to give you an update of where we're at on the whole subdivision. If you haven't seen it, like I said, if you hadn't been on the Railsback Road end, you probably haven't seen much of that. We also have from Lucas Road to the bridge, there is an access road. It's just a gravel road for construction access. That is shared use road with 12 Oaks that was in the original agreement. Has been in place for about 5 years, had another year or so to go on that agreement to allow them access construction-wise.
Andy, have you got a map of that, or?
Yes, I do.
Let's show that again for the benefit of the audience, seeing what you're talking about. In fact, John, I
Found the right one.
hope John's about to get our maps working, and we'll have it.
If I put it on the overhead, I can point to it.
Well, but see, you can't do the overhead.
Tim, we
Yeah,
knew
there it
you were
is.
from outer space. Had to throw that in there.
He's my techno guru.
There we go.
So you can see the access road there, which is basically the alignment which we're going to present to you, and I'll get to here in a little bit. And on this, you can see the 3132 proposed alignment, and where we're connecting into our bridge, and where we're connecting into on Lucas on my client's frontage. But back to the 2007 zoning that was approved by this board. There was a stipulation in that zoning case that we could not get any building permits on the project until the connection was completed from Flournoy Lucas through to, from Railsback Road through to Flournoy Lucas.
Andy, couldn't get building permits.
That's right, could not get a building permit.
Right. Home building permits.
Okay. We could not get a building permit anywhere in the project until that connection was made. And last July, we came in with an alignment and a public dedication that we thought would satisfy that requirement. But that right-of-way was declined by this board because of the access there at Flournoy Lucas and the 3132 and other factors that that was declined. So we were directed at that time to come back with an alignment. And that is what you see before you today. We have a driveway permit approved by DOTD to connect on the Flournoy Lucas Road. There was actually, give a little history, there was one virtually in the same location that was granted back in 2004 to the 12 Oaks project for the construction road. This alignment is just shifting that and adjusting it to the new 4-lane that had been there. And that construction road has been in continuous use since 2000, since that driveway permit was granted in 2004 by the 12 Oaks people and by our development. And this is a right in, right out access only. That was part of the delay from the last meeting. Last time we were before you, when it was turned down, there was an attempt to try to get it worked out to a full access, which would have to go down to the other drive median cut, but that didn't work out, so that's why we're here before you with something very similar. We have completed the construction plans for this alignment. They've been, as I said, we have the driveway permit from DOTD. The plans have been approved. They've been reviewed by the city. The water line is already in place. The sewer line is already in place. Those were separate contracts, separate deals. But we have the street and drainage plans approved by the city. They are the City of Shreveport design requirements and standards. They will be inspected by the City of Shreveport. But at this time, we're not going to dedicate them as a public street. It will remain private under the with the maintenance and belonging to the developer. I'd like to read for you. You probably have it in your packet. In past July 2011, the developer got a letter from DOTD addressing this access. And this letter is from Eric Calavotes, Deputy Secretary of DOTD. Put this on here. You can see I have highlighted in here this last statement that the alignment which we're discussing and which we have presented to you, that the future extension of the inner loop, that is 3132 North Flournoy Lucas, will be impeded by this access. And that's signed by Eric Calavote from in the Baton Rouge office of DOTD. So you may see some things brought up later on that may argue that, but I wanted to show you that we have in writing from DOTD, the Deputy Secretary there, that this would no way impede the extension of 3132. And also, if you go back to our exhibit here, you can see the expected current or this is not my computer. one that was over here, the one that shows the 3132 line.
Another galaxy.
The, black and white. There you go. You can see that our project and our alignment takes into account the possible future extension of 3132 there. And you can see that it in no way physically, engineering-wise, technically, would not interfere with that extension. The bridge is existing. We have to match that location. We're proposing a reasonable alignment back to the frontage on flowing on Lucas Road where we plan to tie in. And so we're here today just to show you this, ask that you acknowledge this as an alignment that would meet the stipulations from the 2007 zoning ordinance that was passed for this property, and that when it is constructed and completed, that we will have completed the obligation to be able to get building permits. I'll be glad to answer any questions of technical nature. We have Mr. Locken here and Tom Arsenault, his attorney. If there's any questions they need to field, they'll be glad to do that.
All right. Mr. Kirkland?
Andy, on your last comment about removing that stipulation, that is a zoning stipulation, and as a matter of procedure, would require a zoning hearing on the removal of that. The other action is to simply let the stip stand, which requires that the roadway be built and completed before building permits for homes.
We're not asking for removal. We're just simply submitting this to the planning commission before we start construction.
Right.
So that we know going into construction that if we proceed as we have told you today and we put on record, that when we complete construction as per the stipulation.
Right.
We're not asking anything to be modified with the stipulation, just that this is our plan. And if y'all can acknowledge receipt of this, and that when we complete the obligation in the, for the stipulation for complete construction is the way the stipulation reads, then that's all that we're asking, that you review this and acknowledge that that's what our what we're submitting today.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, I have a question. I notice you keep stressing 2007, but on that map, will you please point out on the map the area that you all have already started development for your project, and how many acres do you plan to develop? And I've heard a lot about access roads. I hope I'm saying this correct.
Right.
Will you point that out? Be a little more
Can you get the
specific
hard
on
copy
that
so I can
map
put it
you're
on
talking
the
about.
point to it? 'Cause I can't point to it on the computer. That's the little one there.
It was a little bit hidden in there.
Yeah, there you go. I think this will help. I know I got it, know what we're looking up where I'm looking to make sure it is y'all.
Uh-oh.
Okay, Miss, look at this. There we go. This didn't quite get all the way down to Railsback Road.
No,
but-
actually, that's still on the computer, my little thing.
Actually, that was in the entire project, then projected over a aerial photograph that shows all of the proposed development. The proposed development then has a 100 and.
Why don't you, Mr. Moore, point it out as best you can.
Well, the photograph here doesn't actually go all the way down
And
to Railsback Road. As you can see on the aerial there, it does go all the way to Railsback Road. And there's 110 acres below Bayou Pierre, and there's 37 acres north of Bayou Pierre. I think it's about 147, 150, as Tim said. And we're constructed to, if you start at Railsback Road and go south, just about to the tip of the lake, on that side, we have one cul-de-sac on the east side, the first cul-de-sac. The rest of that on the east side is not constructed. But that's all we have right now, which amounts to probably, I don't know the numbers, but probably 50 or 60 acres, maybe more than that. But it is platted as, Unit 1 was just a couple lots out front and a little bit of right-of-way, and then Unit 2 was, how many lots, 24?
The 43 acres, 19 lots.
All right,
Okay.
just so with protocol, Mr. Larkin, he'll be your primary spokesman until you have your turn at the mic.
Okay, yeah, and we were talking about answering questions, so I'll step away and.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Doctor,
I have a question. When you go out there, when we talk about ingress and egress, getting into the subdivision, getting out of the subdivision, when you look at this, it looks good because it's all flat. But when you go out there and look, there's a big hump in that road. And where those people would come out on that development, there's no way, I don't want to say that I would drive because my driving might not equal up to what would have to happen out there, but there's no way for a person who's leaving the subdivision to get across there with that big hump up in the road. It's impossible. Even somebody who drives at my age, and I know the young folk, the way they drive, you'd have all kind of things trying to go over that
I'll
coming
remind
out
you
of that
that
subdivision.
what we have proposed there is a right in and right out only. We are not proposing that you
Then they're
take a
gonna have to
left
come
or a
around.
left off of Florida Lucas to cross at median. But you want to address that?
Well, I think what you're asking the questions now are going to be background things, and we now.
Yep, please come on.
My name is, I'm Timothy Larkin. I'm the developer. I have the background in the land planning part of this. Our engineer here is the one that's executing it, and so the questions that you're asking are going to be more appropriately addressed to me. With respect to your question about the roadways, presently the system that we were required to be installed by this board is one that stretches from Flournoy Lucas Road, north of the bayou, then all the way south to Railsback Road. There is an uplift or a rising part of the land there that you experience as you drive along the road that connects the two areas. In that area, there is that area terminates at the Railsback Road, and so the families that live in our development would access the development either from the Flournoy Lucas Road or the Railsback Road, but there is no drive through the development that would otherwise encourage high-speed traffic.
I'm not talking about driving through the development. I'm talking about leaving. If I'm leaving the development trying to go to work in the mornings,
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
got to come over that I'm talking about. And traffic is probably coming in the opposite direction. And it's impossible to get a clean leave now. And see, I wasn't here in 2007, so I don't know what y'all decided on. I'm just talking about what I see when I drive out there. And when I drive out there, it's really impossible for them to leave that where you're building and you're going on building. And I thought there was some controversy with you and the state about the roads. And I don't think the state has come in yet. I heard him say something about DOT for the state, but I don't see anything in our papers saying that the state has come in and approved or agreed to what you said you were doing. Now, that's the part I remember, because I've been here 2 years, and I remember that part.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you're right. First of all, what we presented to the MPC are two things from the state. One is a letter of agreement that we have with the state on where our entrance will be placed at this time, and that should be in your documentation available for you to see. Secondly, we received in compliance with that agreement, we received a permit from the state to make the connection to the road there. With respect to conflict with traffic, one of the things that you will be pleased to hear is that this ingress and egress is called right in, right out. And it happens to be a system that is promoted throughout the state right now. But what it does away with is all conflict from opposing traffic. So all of the turns are turned into the direction of travel, and all of the turns into the development are turning from the direction of travel, thereby eliminating the conflict that you would normally have as you turn across opposing traffic.
And that bump in the road will not affect the people who are turning out of the development, leaving the development. That's the part I'm talking about.
No, ma'am. At the what we're doing now is we have presented to the city engineering department the profile of the road, and in that profile, the hump that you're talking about is actually removed, and the approach is one that is flat and has only a slight grade to it in order to assure that there's proper drainage.
And that will be moved before you build any more houses?
Yes, ma'am.
I hold people what they say while I'm on the board, and if I drive out there and I see some houses being built, I'm gonna look for a policeman or somebody somewhere.
Well,
Okay, I'm through
I'm
with it.
okay with that.
All
Yes,
right.
we intend to construct these improvements, and they will be ones that are equal to, or in many cases surpass, the road construction minimums that the city of Shreveport obligates us to do. And in addition to that, all of the construction that goes on there will be inspected by the city of Shreveport.
And by me.
In fact, I can tell that I'll make sure that we'll get that road smooth right away.
Thank you very much.
Are there any more questions from board members for this gentleman? Any more questions? That's all I can think of very much.
I'll just make one final comment.
Please go
from
right
what our intent here is we've been operating this ingress and egress for since we purchased the property, and we are now at the point where the ingress and egress that we have been using, it's appropriate for us to pave it. Other than that, the behavior of things will go on much the same. All of the materials will be delivered from the Flournoy Lucas end as we had planned, and we intend to be complete this portion of the construction within the next 60 days.
All right. If there are no further questions for this gentleman, is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of this request? Is there anyone else who care to speak in favor of this request?
I think it's,
All right. Those of you who are standing, we would invite you to come on in and find a seat. As I stated earlier, we choose not to aggravate the fire marshal, and I'll hesitate not to call you by name because you know I know who you are standing back there. So come on up. There's some rows, seats on the front row and what have you. At this particular time, the mic is open to anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this request.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Andrew Como. My address is 3602 Gilbert Drive, Shreveport, zip code 71104. And I am now a chaplain of many of the residents at the Oaks of Louisiana. And in my career, I have served as chaplain for many of the residents that live in the other retirement communities along that road. And I'm here to speak of my concern for those residents as they travel to and from where they have to go, because that travel always involves getting on Flournoy Lucas Road. And you've heard a lot about the changes and the upgrade in Flournoy Lucas Road, but from our point of view along that road, the traffic has significantly increased, and particularly in large vehicles that are on their way to service the port and to also the natural gas fields in that area. And also, since the road is open to 5 lanes, the speed limit has increased from 35 miles an hour to 45 and now 50 miles an hour. And as you may know, and as we know very well, vehicles and many of those large vehicles even exceed that speed limit, creating quite a danger to those that travel the roads. Our residents at the Oaks of Louisiana, many of them drive themselves. Some are transported by us, and the road has gotten significantly more dangerous since the widening of the road. I think, first of all, that it's imperative that 3132 extension be completed, and that no decisions by this board would be anything that would impede that extension. I think in the meantime, though, there's some things that we can pay attention to make this road safer. Many of you heard about the accident that took a man's life on a motorcycle last week, and the accident, the original reason for the accident was a malfunction, I understand, in the motorcycle, but the speed of the vehicle that actually took the man's life is in question, and so that happened right in this intersection that we're talking about today. One of the things that we noticed also is that the traffic backed up onto 3132 and in both directions on Florina Lucas Road, impeding the emergency vehicles from getting to this victim, and also any other people that might have needed it at that time, it would have been impeded as well. So I think certainly any things that we can do to help facilitate this 3132 being complete and not putting any obstacles in the way would be, I think would be what I would voice to you today. A couple of things about what we're speaking about particularly is this new curb cut into Florina Lucas Road. For one thing, it will increase the movement in and out of that area on an already very dangerous road. I would think that perhaps in the future, when 3132 is complete and most of that traffic, or a lot of it, continues on further south, then this might be a time for this to be able to be accomplished. But at this time, I think it's just going to complicate an already difficult situation. Also, I would say the decision on this matter would have to do with, we'd have to be very clear about if this would hinder any of the, encroach upon any of the land that would be needed to continue 3132. And so those two factors, I'd say, I would ask you to consider before you make this decision about Mr. Larkin's request today. And I thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions for this gentleman before he takes his seat? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I may, and Mr. Stonecipher, excuse me, but several people had indicated before this hearing today that they would be the principal spokesperson for a number of folks, and if I think it would be helpful to the board, because of the time limit, if those individuals were to identify themselves, and Elliot, I'm guessing you are because of your position, and a few others, but that would help, Mr. Chairman. And then if you need additional time, you can ask the board to grant that.
I thank you for bringing that to our attention, because the first spokesman gets 10 minutes and those afterward gets 3 normally, as the instructions were, but I think that's all that happened. So please go right ahead and we'll see what we can do to work with you.
Thank you.
Before you do that, let me understand something. So we're breaking the rules and having more than one spokesperson on this
No,
particular
I think
case.
they'd have to ask for that when they come forward. I happen to think, I don't know this, Mr. Stonecipher, I suspect, is considered a principal spokesperson, but I think there are more than one. But if someone else says, I'm a principal spokesperson, they would need the board to approve them having a longer period of time to speak, so as not to break the rules, Ms. Rucker.
Exactly, so that's what we need to do to approve
Exactly.
it first.
My name is Elliot Stonecipher, and I am the principal spokesperson for the finished 3132. Coalition. And I'm also a resident of 12 Oaks. So, Mr. Chairman and members, we do appreciate the opportunity to make the presentation. We've run into some bad luck along the way in the last few months in not being called to the meetings where some of these presentations get made. And we really do appreciate the fact that we have this 10 minutes. We have a question of clarification. We understand from the agenda that this is an acceptance by MPC of an application previously submitted?
Yes, in essence. If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, please.
2 or 3 years ago, Mr. Larkin had an alignment coming forward from Esplanade Bridge to Florida Lucas, but he didn't go all the way to it. What he asked the board to do, he only came part way, and he said, I'm going to go see if I can get a better alignment that satisfies me, and he specifically said, I'm going to talk to the Glen. And we assumed that, incorrectly, as it turned out, that would happen fairly quickly and that he would come back fairly quickly and say, either I have a new alignment, which I'll show you, or I will go ahead and run it out to Florida Lucas at where it really is shown now as the temporary construction entry. Unbeknownst to us, it took quite some time and several approaches by Mr. Larkin for different alignments, none of which apparently worked. And so now he's back submitting what is because that's why the board put a condition on him and his development, said we will not give you any building permits until you do have this road shown and built, basically to the benefit of the public.
So is there a vote actually today on the application for the roadway?
It would be my recommendation that the board vote up or down
Okay.
on what Mr. Larkin has submitted.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, may I stipulate that Mr. Kirkland just took a bunch of my time?
I counted on him.
Thank you. Frankly, we are, as you can tell, the coalition, and I want to thank all the folks that are here from the general public as well that don't know a whole lot about this issue. I hope we can help with that. We are very confused, literally. We don't have an engineer in the group that I know of, and we're not developers and we're not builders, and we don't understand all about the process. We've been trying to learn. We thought the set of circumstances that existed today on the issue of 3132 precluded this consideration. So that's how confused we are. But I will explain where that came from, and Mr. Kirkland, if you can help me, I would appreciate it. I want to start just by saying that for those who don't know, I'll do a real Cliff Notes version of this, but while this particular image is on the screen, I think it's a good way for me to point out part of our confusion. You'll see that the double line that runs through this image, sweeping down, yes, thank you very much.
Right.
That is I believe I heard Andy Craig say that it's the possible or the proposed route for 3132.
It's hypothetical.
Okay. I did want to point that out. The heart of our confusion is that we know there is $1 million, 2-year study underway to determine a route.
Right.
So there's not a route. And
No.
if that doesn't happen, then the circumstances here today.
And the only right-of-way, Elliot, as you know, is that which the city owns up closer to Florida
The
Lucas.
very top of that
That's
area
right.
right
Would
there.
you point that out? The only right-of-way owned by the city for the purpose of extension is that portion right there.
Right, 16 acres. Right. Now, just to kind of make the point a little bit more dramatically, I guess, wait, I'm going to have to stick something on top of this. If we could, I'd like to go back to the letter that Mr. Craig used to show you that we interpret what's going on very much differently. Let me read this same paragraph again. I'll read it in full. This is a July 29th, 2011 letter from Deputy Secretary of Department of Transportation and Development, Eric Calavoda, to Mr. Larkin. This is some 3 months almost after the April 7th NLCOG meeting last year that got all this started. The front page of this letter, which I have, if anyone has questions, does describe what it is DOTD is approving Mr. Larkin to do, but the text of that letter is rich in references to the presumed joint entrance and exit between Mr. Larkin and the Glen. Everything in the context of that first page believes that there's going to be a temporary road built, as we were looking at a moment ago, because there's a major 4-lane change to 3132, a curb cut, a road that goes across Flournoy Lucas. None of that happened. Now, if anyone here today knows that the state is going to try to expropriate the Glen's land, that changes what I'm saying. We have tried to find out. We've used public records requests. We have found no such evidence that there is an expropriation coming. So page 1 is in a context that does not exist. Here's the paragraph that matters, though, on page 2. The future extension of the interloop from Flournoy Lucas Road to the south shall not be impeded by the improvements discussed herein or by any other DOTD, NLCOG, city, MPC, or LDC, Larkin Development Corporation, actions. Non-engineers that we are, we read that to say we shouldn't be here today, and I mean that with due respect. We don't understand what this is really all about, because anything that is built in that, if I could put that back up for a second, anything that is built in Mr. Larkin's 36.99 acres, which is this piece right here, showing his road that he's applying for, that is, by our interpretation and by the records we have found, that is within a possible route corridor that you would not be building in. So we're confused. The second part of that is, as Mr. Craig and Mr. Larkin acknowledged, there is now, has been for 5 years, and will be for a long time, a temporary road there already. It has a curb cut, right in, right out, into Flournoy Lucas. 1 year from now, its cooperative use between 12 Oaks and Esplanade falls away. It's Esplanade only. It does have a route, it's not shown here, but attached to that temporary road with curb cut already in place is a cut that goes directly over Mr. Larkin's bridge. So we're, second point, we don't understand why we need another temporary road when we're waiting on $1 million 2-year study to see where the route goes. So that's more of our confusion. I'll add to it. For those on the Cliff Notes version, this is the 91-92 study that started all this. This piece right here was the finding of the 91-92 Interloop Corridor Extension Study. And for those of you who don't know what this is BioPierre right here. This particular route was set forth. This study had 11 options it studied. Had a lot of people who are with us here today on the Citizens Advisory Committee. That route actually went away because 12 Oaks got built into that route. And to show you how dramatic that is, this is a page that the City Engineering Department presented last year in this context. If you'll look, this is the same route. And again, this is copyrighted to the City of Shreveport, City Engineering Department. The same route is right here, and you can see how much of 12 Oaks it runs through. So that route, for whatever reasons, and there's a lot of discussion and debate, it went away. So, next point. 91-92 study. Thank you. Next thing that happens is what brings the coalition here, non-engineers that we are. This is what the people know. This is what the general public knows. This is in 1996. The Citizens Bond Issue Committee final report dated January 1996 included a $3.5 million proposition for voter consideration on the April 20th 96 bond election ballot for the Interloop extension to the Port of Caddo-Bossier. The ballot proposition noted that $3.5 million, if approved by voters, would be for acquisition of right-of-way, utilities, and design. Here are the results. You can look at the bottom of the middle of the page. 15,448 people voted for it, so it passed almost 2-1. They weren't there voting willy-nilly for everything on the ballot. You can look at what happened to the request at the same time for a stadium. It went down 53-47. We believe that's what we're here for. What did the people do? What did they say? Was it clear enough? We believe this is how we get to that whole subject. Strangely enough, nobody knew this, and we still don't have an explanation for how this happened. But that route I showed you a few minutes ago, in 2003, was the second route disappearance. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, NLCOG, the Northwest Louisiana Council of Governments, and you can't see it, I'm going to show you the blow-up. In this study, the Parsons-Brinkerhoff study, and also in the 2001 to 2025 transportation update, the route suddenly appears in a different place. No action was taken by any official body. No documentation exists as to how it happened. No answers have been offered, but our request for public records has not been fully complied with by any means, and we've had to struggle to get these records. You'll see on the blow-up,
2003.
you look carefully, this time the road is going on the Railsback Road side of Vieux-Pierre. Interestingly, what Mr. Larkin just showed is that route. That's what was on the first map we looked at. Now, the point being, we lost one route, then we kind of lost it again. We don't understand how that happened. So at this point, the people are batting 0 for 2 at least. Then we have a document that was never produced by the city or by NLCOG. We got it from the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. I'm going to turn it upside down so you can orient yourself. This is from Mr. Larkin's own planning. He presented this to LADOTD, and it shows what his intention was. This is Flournoy Lucas. This is Mr. Larkin's use of the city's 16 acres, which he drew in. These are houses and cul-de-sacs right below the city's 16 acres. Can't see the colors here. This is the city's 16 acres. This is Mr. Larkin's 36.99 acres. This is the lower 37. This is the upper 100.5 acres. And you see the houses that he intended to plan to build all the way through here. This is also the city giving him the 16 acres that the people voted for in 1996. That was bought, by the way, in 1999. And for those of you who are into trivia, we the people paid $75,000 for it in 1999. One of the lots in Mr. Larkin's subdivision has sold for $510,000, and it was 1 acre. So you can imagine what the value is of that 16 acres now. I just want to make sure we all understand how confusing all of this is. So let me just run these by you quickly. This is a bunch of quotes from people who have been very, very involved in this debate from the beginning. First one of note is from Tony Janka, Shreveport Development Corporation, back in October of 2004. This is when the route got moved, and the MPC, based on the assertions of NLCOG, did approve that rezoning. So the quote is, attached you'll find my letter to Charles Kirkland indicating that we are prepared to set aside sufficient acreage according to the new alignment recommended by the Caddo-Bossier Transportation Plan update. Now, technically correct, but in fact there's no narrative in that study that says who did it, why it was being done, how it happened, nor was there in the attached, in essence, Parsons-Brinkerhoff study. It just got moved, and that allowed 12 Oaks to take out the first corridor. Next quote. This is from Stephen Jean, MPC. This is in 2010. Mr. Larkin is proposing to utilize the land currently owned by the city of Shreveport for access to the Esplanade development for at least a temporary basis. This land is intended to be the starting point of what would eventually be the extension of Highway 3132 to the south. So we have the MPC pushing an alarm gong saying, look, let's remember, if you let them build in there, there's a problem. This is supposed to be for 3132. Now we're to the April 7th meeting at NLCOG last year, Mayor Glover's 4-part motion. This is the first part. That the MPO, that is not the MPC. MPO is the Metropolitan Planning Organization within the NLCOG, that the MPO rescind the approved corridor alignment for the southerly extension of Interloop from Flournoy Lucas to Highway 1. That's how it went away, but the mayor was referring to it as the approved corridor alignment. And in that meeting, it was killed. Then Ron Norwood, city engineer. 12 Oaks brought their case to the MPC to have he's giving a history to the city attorney. Our city engineer is trying to advise the city attorney appropriately, of course, last May on what in the world this was all about. 12 Oaks brought their case to the MPC to have the corridor area rezoned to allow for continued development. The MPC in late 2004 turned them down 3 times, requesting additional information. Finally, in January 2005, the MPC voted unanimously to rezone the property, allowing development to occur within the preferred corridor. There's been a lot of debate. We say that 12 Oaks got into the preferred corridor. A lot of other people say they didn't. The city engineer says they did too. Notably, when the land was sold by Mr. Janka in 2007 to Mr. Larkin, the route was not preserved in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So the guarantee on which MPC acted in 2004 was it was false. It did not happen. Mr. Woody Wilson, last May speaking, this is the parish administrator, of course, with us today. He very quickly saw the point. Quote, "There is no official corridor that exists?" Question mark, end quote. Later in the same meeting, Mr. Wilson, quote, "The community seems to misunderstand that a pre-approved corridor exists." Next, Ron Norwood, city engineer. This is also last May. After Glover asked how the 9192 corridor on the map came about, Mr. Norwood stated, quote, "It is the preferred corridor for the Interloop extension." Last but not least, from Mr. Jambor, MPC. The MPC, top of the page, the MPC has simply been preserving a patch of ground so that we might be able to build a road in the future if we choose to do so. That's not what the voters said. They didn't say if we choose, the MPC or anybody else. They said we put the money down, and then 3 years later we bought the 16 acres to make sure nobody gummed up the works. Shows you that didn't work very well. But it's not if we choose to. It's we're going to do it. Now, Dr. Calavoda was asked in last May, this is a long, long piece in which he says, in the middle, there's a rather lengthy discussion of the Interloop Extension Corridor Study, including the public participation and the advisory committee that reached a unanimous agreement for the preferred alignment from 9192. You'll see that included were the Shreveport Council of Governments, that's the predecessor to NLCOG, Department of Public Works, MPC, City Engineer, Traffic Engineer. A lot of us here today were here then, and the recommendation was for the 9192 route, which got lost somewhere along the line.
Mr. Stonesifer, if I might add.
Okay.
We've allowed you 15 minutes,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and if you don't mind, if you could kind of help us, because
Sure.
we have a really long
Last
agenda
point.
for today. All right, thank you.
Closing point. Thank you very much. We still take the position, and we take it more strongly every day as this research continues, that the people who worked between 1991 and 2001 had it right. And here's the point. Whatever else happened since then, which made everything go south, and I mean that figuratively, and I wish it had, lives would have been saved if what the people said to do and put their money down to do had happened. They were right, and they did the right things for the right reasons. It has been undone. We're asking respectfully that the MPC stop anything else that can possibly, by any reckoning, impede a $1 million study that's underway that might really find a route that needs to be done. We want those trucks off of Flournoy Lucas. It's dangerous. They were never intended there. And the people had it right. The MPC that worked with us then had it right. The city had it right. Everything changed in '01. So our appeal to you is to please set it straight. And please don't approve this application. Thank you all very
Questions
much.
for Mr. Stonesifer? Yes, ma'am.
I have one. Mr. Stonesifer.
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you lived in 12 Oaks?
2 years.
2 years. from observation, I noticed that you had a lot of documentation.
Yes, ma'am.
When you first started talking, you stated that Mr. Larkins, and I guess his committee, it's not been good communication. You named several groups in that area. Citizen Advisory Group, you correct me.
Yes, ma'am, from 91, 92.
Coalition of Citizens.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're praising us for having a meeting
Yes, ma'am.
of this type.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to know if they're met with the residential people in that area to let them know step by step what they are doing. Do you feel it's some hidden agendas that you all are not being abreast on?
I can be a little more categorical than that.
Will you please?
Ms. Smith, we've been researching this, and by the way, I do every bit of this work pro bono. I don't get paid any way, shape, form, or fashion.
Very good documentation.
And we've been working now for almost a year. We have literally, I have personally read thousands, easily, of pages of documentation. Much went wrong.
Okay.
Much of it is pure political influence. No question about it. That's what happened. It happens all the time. We now understand. We didn't know that. A lot of what has happened, like communication with the citizenry, is actually the responsibility under these crazy rules with the Federal Highway Department. NLCOG is the one that's supposed to make sure that all the communications are appropriate, yet when their hearing happened not too long ago on this very issue, they wouldn't let us speak. When the mayor wanted the city council to be updated last week, only Mr. Larkin and NLCOG got to speak. We were not even told it was going to happen. So now we are deeply into the phase where a lot of misrepresentation is going on. I think the politics is pretty clear. The mayor made it clear last week. He's a very close friend, of course, of the developers. I respect that. They've been friends way before this happened. But the council's ready to overturn what y'all do. So we understand the politics. We will do everything we can to prevent that. But we right now can only ask you to please believe that we've worked as diligently as we can. We've found documents that no one ever would have given us willingly, and it's not a pretty picture. Our point is, it's the people who got stiff, and there's no way around that. These are for-profit interests that took two routes after the people voted 64-36, put their money in the till, and everything they were promised has been taken from them. Factually. There's no question that that has happened. Now, we're back trying to set things straight. There's a 2-year study underway, $1 million cost. We believe no one should be allowed to further damage the public will and intention, certainly until that study is over. How we can be talking about building in the route yet again when the study's not done, we do not understand. And thank you for your question.
And thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Stoneside?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Darrell Rabouche, 9312 Shenandoah Circle, Shreveport, Louisiana, 11-1115. I'm not here as part of the...
Yeah, as much as we love you, we're going to hold you to the 3 minutes.
No, sir, I am not here as part of the coalition. I am here as a resident of Acadiana Place with the knowledge and consent of many of my neighbors whose names are signed on this petition, 145 signatures. And I'm parachuting in to give you a breather from 3132 for the moment, even though it's inextricably related. So I don't think that it's appropriate to restrict me to 3 minutes, although I hope not to go much longer than that. It's a long day. I'd like to show you this just to give you an orientation of who I represent. Here is the mythical route of 3132 to the south. This is Flournoy Lucas Road, 12 Oaks. This is the Glen right here, and this is my neighborhood. So as you can see, anything that happens here will very likely have a strong impact on us. And we have one way in and one way out of our neighborhood right there. It's the only way in, the only way out. And so we're only here today to urge the MPC to protect our interests as a neighborhood and as a subdivision, to do whatever's appropriate in your view to protect us from unwanted traffic and congestion that would arise with the construction of this proposed subdivision entrance, and particularly if that leads to an interchange which will create a curb cut on the north side of Flournoy Lucas Road, because that would directly impact our neighborhood, as you can see. We believe that any construction of that nature could hamper the ease of access to and from our neighborhood, and that it would set the stage potentially, and we know the zoning is in place, but we also are very well aware that zoning can be changed for unwanted commercial development adjacent to our neighborhood. And I have a question about what we're discussing here today, this right in, right out right here. Is that a temporary construction entrance, or are we perceiving that as a permanent solution for access and egress to Esplanade?
Mr. Kirkland?
I believe the applicant can speak to that better. When the permit was issued by the state to the 12 Oaks development, there was no restriction on that permit for that curb cut. It didn't say temporary. We looked at that and were concerned ourselves about what that permit said. And I believe the applicant can present the information related to that. But granted, as a curb cut for traffic, it very well might have, and I don't think it does have, any limitation. And the words temporary and construction entrance, I think you may know, as some of us do, 12 Oaks put a sign there.
I see it every day.
That called it a construction entrance or a temporary entrance, but that didn't necessarily mean that that's what they got permitted. They did not show, they being 12 Oaks, did not show any development of that area in their plan.
Again, our concern as a neighborhood is what will happen down the road. We're talking about domino effects. We're not talking about what's going to happen here in 60 days. We're talking about what will happen a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. What will happen if this intersection, or one near it, particularly the long-discussed intersection in cooperation with the Glen, what if that is extended to the north of Flournoy Lucas Road and the property adjacent to our neighborhood? We're asking you to protect our interests as a neighborhood. Right now, with the right in, right out, if you allow construction of homes in there, think about what people are going to do. There's a divider in Flournoy Lucas Road at that point. People are going to jump that divider. People are going to drive past our neighborhood, go down, make a U-turn. People are going to take U-turns through the Glen. It's just going to happen. It's just human nature. So our concern, again, not to be redundant, is for you to protect our interest as a neighborhood, our property values, our safety, the safety of my children and some of our elder residents who come in and out of there with one way in and one way out. And we're not here necessarily to stand in opposition to Esplanade or to Mr. Larkin's interests. We're simply here to protect our own. And with that in mind, I'd like to submit to you a copy of a petition signed by 145 residents of Acadiana Place, and we thank you for taking that on the record.
Any questions for this gentleman before he takes a seat? Mr. Kirkland?
I appreciate what you had to say. The real difficulty is, as you know, and all the rest of us know, the state controls 31 or Flournoy Lucas. And as such, I don't recall any public hearings when they decided to widen it to 5 lanes. I know it was talked about over any number of years prior to them doing it, but one day we all pretty well woke up and the state had decided to fund it and build it in record time with little or no public input that I'm aware of. They didn't come to us or the city, or they may have been private discussions, I suspect, about building it. I know the port wanted a better roadway system between Bert Coons and Highway 1.
Yes, Mr. Kirkland, but that's what 3132 is supposed to be.
Well, in fact, the issue was that, my point is this, you and other concerned citizens, including the MPC, need to make sure that our state legislators, I suspect, are tuned into this and basically also help protect the interest of these property owners in this area. Otherwise, the state is likely to, depending on who's governor and who's secretary of transportation, decide to make improvements that none of us like.
On point, sir, mentioned in the petition is the possibility that state funds will be used to help construct this access to Esplanade, and it strikes us as, I don't know, ironic that we couldn't get a right turn lane into our neighborhood when they widened Flournoy Lucas Road to 5 lanes, and, you know, that would have been a drop in the bucket in comparison to what's being contemplated being spent for this interchange for entrance and exit to Esplanade. So, you know, it's what you know, it's who you know. And so I guess my final point, unless there are other questions, our point here today is to let the MPC, and we will let the City Council, and we will let the DOTD know that we're awake, we're watching, and we will be awake for zoning changes. I have the zoning map here, and right now the area that's concerned is residential agriculture. Part of it is zoned for business, but we just don't want businesses cropping up, particularly my neighbors right here on Prestonwood Drive. If anything is developed in this area, man, we're going to have whatever it is, store backs, dumpsters, stray cats, and everything else in their backyards. And that's really our overriding concern. So we wanted to let you know that we're here, we're alert, we ask you for your help in protecting our neighborhood's interest, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak in opposition to this request?
My name is Jim McMichael. I'm a lawyer. I represent Willis-Knighton Medical Center. It appears today not only as a member of the Finish 3132 Coalition and a supporter of the comments that have been made and may be made yet in opposition to Mr. Larkin's proposal, but also as a property owner in the area that may suffer a direct and negative impact to the extent anything that Mr. Larkin does interferes with, hinders, or delays the extension of Highway 3132 south from Flournoy Lucas. Willis-Knighton has appeared before this body and many others during this entire saga, and it's made clear that it has 3 principal goals in mind. Number 1, to not let anything or anyone interfere with the plans to extend 3132 south of Flournoy Lucas. Number 2, to protect its residents at the Oaks from the clear and specific traffic dangers that exist on Flournoy Lucas with the increased traffic volume and the type of traffic. Father Como did a good job of outlining the dangers that exist there as a result. And finally, its third objective is to protect its economic investment and its future in the Oaks development. So its purpose may be somewhat different and more urgent and economic than the Finish 3132 Coalition. I think 2 points need to be made. The overall point is this seems to be, if Mr. Larkin is successful, a classic example of putting the cart before the horse. And he wants to achieve that by giving a misimpression to this commission about the meaning of Dr. Calavoda's statement at the end of the letter that was put up by Mr. Craig during his presentation. Dr. Calavoda that was not a conclusion on Dr. Calavoda's part that what Mr. Larkin proposes would not interfere with 3132. That was a directive by Dr. Calavoda that despite what may be on the first page, nothing that Mr. Larkin does will be permitted to interfere with 3132. So you have to put that in the context of what it really means, and I'm sure Mr. Craig or perhaps Mr. Larkin will correct the misimpression they left you with when they first told you about that letter. But the point is there are studies underway to determine where the route for 3132 is going to go, and to ask this commission to approve the construction of a road and asphalt and what have you before that route is determined truly is putting the cart before the horse, because any construction in the area that ends up within the route that is finally determined to be the preferred route by the ongoing study is going to hinder, delay, or as Mayor Glover has told you, and as Mr. Stonecipher quoted will prevent altogether the extension of 3132. That was the point of what was going on last April. Not where's it going to be, but that it's not going to be once we pull this off. So I think the point to be made is it's unfair for Mr. Larkin to ask this commission to make this determination before we know what all the facts are. The facts being, where is the route going to be? We're spending millions of dollars to determine that. Let's let that happen before we take the step Mr. Larkin is asking you to take here. Now, you know, we've got a record. I think you are, you ought to look at the record and ask yourself what Mr. Larkin has told you and urged you to do, and then why is he telling you to do it? He has articulated no good reason why the temporary construction road that he's now using and has been using satisfactorily for years won't be okay until the determination is made where the route is going. There's been no reason given to you by Mr. Larkin why he can't wait, just as you all ought to wait, just as the public ought to wait to find out where's the road going to go. And then we'll all know whether Mr. Larkin can proceed with his plans or not. So we urge you to turn down his application at this point. Thank you.
Any questions for this gentleman before he takes his seat? Thank you very much, Councilor. Anyone else in opposition to this request? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Willie Bradford. To the other members of the commission, Mr. Kirkland.
Mr. Bradford, be so kind as to give us an address, please.
My address is 3658 Elon Street, Shreveport, 71109. Mr. Chairman, I'm a member and a resident of Queensboro, and I'm here today because the extension of 3132 is not a Southeast Shreveport issue. It's a Shreveport issue. You would only have to talk to some residents of Queensboro or the MLK communities who work in that area of town, especially at the port of Shreveport-Bossier, to understand the difficulties they have sometimes just getting to and from work because of the traffic congestions. I'm not here, Mr. Chairman, to oppose any development, but I am here to oppose any action that will jeopardize the completion of extension 3132. I have tried to stay informed in regards to this issue. As was mentioned earlier, prior to the April 7th, 2011 meeting of the NLCOG, I, like others, believe that the completion of 3132 was certain. However, I'm not so sure at this point. You see, in spite of years of planning and anticipation, the action taken at the April 2011 meeting of NLCOG is what has us here today. It was there that a motion was made to terminate the extension of 3132 South, to terminate that, Mr. Chairman, altogether. The only reason this project is back on the table is because of the efforts of the Finish 3132 Coalition and other concerned citizens. But I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this body for maintaining your principles in dealing with this matter. I am somewhat confused and concerned, like Mr. Stomsype had mentioned, and why are we even here taking up this issue today, when the route and the recommendation from the study have not yet been determined. I am hopeful yet that we don't have a repeat of what happened in April of 2011. So I request of you today that you follow the protocol that you have established as the Metropolitan Planning Commission, and that you will not be swayed by political pressure, misinformation, and half-truth, that you will not deal with this issue until such time that all the facts are in. If some members of NLCOG was here, they have been going around, as well as others, conducting themselves without any attention to facts, fairness, and transparency. We don't want that to happen again, Mr. Chairman. Because over the last 12 months, mountains of evidence has been uncovered to support that, Ms. Smith, that something was not being done right. Mountains of evidence, emails and other documents that has become a part of some records because of the public information request. We have people now, Mr. Chairman, who's going around promoting the idea that, oh, I'm just trying to help some poor developer when they themselves was a part of what I considered the action that would have terminated this project. I ask you today, finally, ask yourselves, what has actually changed since we dealt with this 6 months ago? What have changed would have you to reconsider issuing building permits into Mr. Larkin's development that will give him the opportunity to build a permanent road? What has happened? Nothing has happened. So I exhort you, please allow this process, the initiation of the $1 million study that will answer many of our questions regarding the feasibility of the completion of 3132 South. Let it be allowed to continue, because once we know the route, the feasibility, the cost, then I think we all could be comfortable that fairness was finally executed, and that we can collectively go back to being a city without these type of controversies. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so thank you very much. Any questions for this gentleman? All right. Are there other persons who wish to speak in opposition? I'm going to hasten to remind you that we would advise you to please try and hold your comments to 3 minutes, in that we do have a very lengthy agenda for today. Thank you. Go right ahead, sir.
I'm Gil Pittard, 492 Grand Oaks Drive, Shreveport, 71106. And I'm very interested in what's going on here. Short story, maybe I can keep it short. I was born and raised in Grand Cane. I went to school at Louisiana Tech, got an engineering degree, applied for jobs. There were no jobs in Shreveport or in Louisiana. Every offer I got was outside of the state. I left. But my mother and dad were here, my in-laws were here. We continued to come back, and we watched things happen in Shreveport. We're talking about a long period of time now. We're talking about 55, 56 years. But we saw development going. We saw 3132 come on the books. We saw the plans for it to continue on the Highway 1. When we moved back to Shreveport, we were checking the neighborhoods where we wanted to live. We checked 3132, and yes, it was being extended to Burt Coon. Okay, we bought in the neighborhood. We believed that what was legally done and established something like 40 years ago was still being followed, coming to fruition. It has not. We've seen it blocked. We've seen it shut off completely. Then we've seen that emails are lost. We can't find them. We can't deliver them. And I believe what the coalition has been doing has left some stains on the politics of this area. And that was one of the things that I got to be the brunt of some jokes where I lived outside of Louisiana. I lived several places in Texas. I lived in Virginia. I lived in Maryland. I lived in Germany. And every time I was introduced to new people, not in a meeting like this, but socially, they'd say, "Oh, Louisiana, you got web feet? How's politics there? You know, how many dead people vote?" Well, that went with me. And are we still doing it in Northwest Louisiana? I want to speak strongly against doing anything that interferes with the completion of that highway, and to stop this doing studies, getting it laid out, and then blocking it and starting over, study again. Maybe we ought to go back to the one that was previously done and stop this one going on now. But stop that. Don't let public money go in to private development. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Bill Weiner, Jr., retired architect planner. I live at number 2 Longleaf Lane. I came to this meeting because of another issue. And I've sat in and listened, and I have questions. They're not for or against, but things that weren't covered that would lead to where I would stand. Are there going to be traffic lights anywhere on the Flournoy Lucas Road where it intersects with 3132, either on the access roads or anywhere along there?
Bill, only the state will decide that because it's a state road.
Okay, well, that would have a real
The
bearing.
probability is high that there will be.
Okay, assuming there is, if you have a traffic light on the eastbound lane going to the right, it will back cars up and block that intersection. And you're just going to have a terrible situation. Whether it's right turn in or right turn out or right now, it won't work because that's on the backside of a light. Is the bridge elevated? I couldn't tell. Nobody talked about that. Do you know?
They haven't decided that.
It'll either be elevated or the road will be depressed.
Don't know. The
And
state
with the
will decide
bio
that.
there, it's doubtful that the road will be depressed because it'll fill up with water. So if it's elevated, cars coming from the right, the east, up over a bridge, will not be seen as they peek over the bridge, and people coming out of the proposed road can be hit because they can't see the cars coming. Excuse me.
Bill, it's highly likely that the design will be very similar to that which is at Bert Coons and 49, or as you know, 3132 already has elevated crossings.
Okay. The last thing that really does bother me, for many years we've been working on a network of roads, loops, outer loops, expressways coming in, they hit the loops, they go around. This extension of 3132 is a critical part of this network. It will connect Highway 1, the port, Highway 1, 3132, I-49, I-20, I-220, going up around the town to the north. And we've always talked about the loop, outer loop. It's critical. You can't have a loop with a gap. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask, are there any other persons who care to speak in opposition who will not be repeating basically what we've already heard? Please go right ahead.
I'm Rhonda Bove, 403 East Flournoy Lucas Road, Shreveport 71115. And I'm President and CEO of the Glenn Retirement System. And I speak to you today on behalf of the Glenn Board of Directors. As you can only imagine, our board has recently spent considerable time discussing the extension of 3132. After enduring years of construction on Flournoy Lucas and the added traffic we now have because of that construction, we always thought that the light at the end of the tunnel would be the extension of 3132. As novices in the world of politics, we are shocked to learn how housing developments came to be that clearly impact the 3132 extension. It appears to us that no one really cares about what the added traffic has done to our community. As I drove to work this morning and I veered right off of 3132 at Flournoy Lucas, a large red truck flew around me, blew their horn, made an obscene sign, and passed me. They had to be going at least 80 by the time they got to the main entrance of the Glen. I prayed my parents weren't on their way to the doctor or to the Walmart. We respectfully ask that until the 3132 study is completed, that no further construction be allowed on Mr. Larkin's property that could jeopardize the 3132 extension. I want to be clear in saying that the Glen has no personal issue with Tim Larkin. We would feel the same way if Tim the Tool Man owned the property and he was making the same request to the MPC. On behalf of our board and the safety of our residents, I thank you.
All right. Are there other persons who care to speak in opposition? Are there other persons who care to speak in opposition? Then at this time, we provide opportunity for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to have a public meeting and listen to the things that have been said here and are confused or stated to be elements of confusion, because I think this is the place that you look to get some of that straightened out. The first thing I think that is really important with respect to the letter that you all are referring to with Dr. Calavoda, the letter accompanied our right-of-way, and it was specifically that right-of-way attached to that letter that was approved. Following that approval by Dr. Calavoda, a permit was issued to us for this road that you see before you. With respect to Father Como's concern with the truck traffic on Flournoy Lucas Road, I'll say one thing that I do think has been an unknown benefit by the forward thinking of the 12 Oak subdivision. Our entrance there that has been operating that way actually since 2004 has accommodated all of the truck traffic and truck deliveries that go to our development and that go to 12 Oaks. That removes those trucks from in front of Father Como's establishment. It also removes them from the entry road in 12 Oaks and lets them complete their development and without those trucks being on that highway, which is a real benefit, because that seems to be one of the things that's so very important here that gets addressed. With respect to the 3132 corridor, one of the things that we learned from the proposal that has been now placed in a study format with the NLCOG was that we are one of 3 alignments that are being considered for the extension of 3132. When we learned of this particular alignment that goes across property that we own, one of the things that we did with the Planning Commission is we told them and then began planning a development plan that can be utilized in an optional way. First and foremost, we're planning for the extension of 3132 to come through. And by that, we have voluntarily removed the property that extension would sit on there from consideration for development at this time. However, we see no problem in letting the study go on, and should it be determined that 3132 will not go here, it just so happens that our development plan can accommodate the utilization of that once everyone in the community has decided that in fact is what's going to happen. Until then, we have no intention of occupying that. However, in doing so, we have presented to you all schematics of how that property could be used in that case. I'm afraid that they've been misinterpreted by, for instance, Mr. Stonecipher, that is a plan that we somehow have a permit to do or that we're somehow zoned to do. There was a statement made that the city should never consider giving us the 16 acres that Mr. Stonecipher said they had given, or were going to give us, or maybe we asked for. That is confusing. Make no mistake about it, that is, we know that is a right-of-way. It's indicated so in the deed that the city took when they bought that property. Part of the schematic of 3132 shown there would be to have a apron built on the south side of that right-of-way. And the ill-fated proposition that we brought before the city was that we would pave at our expense that intersection, thereby being the first improvements of the extension of 3132. And at the time that we were directed otherwise, we would vacate it, and there you would have a solution for the interim period that seemed to us to make sense. It seemed like it was a winner. Why? It's about $750,000, and that would have been $750,000 that the taxpayers would have avoided spending. And it would sit on a public right-of-way, and it would be publicly dedicated. However, we understand and heard everyone loud and clear, don't do that. Believe me, we're gone. You know, we do not intend to do that, and have withdrawn the offer to do that. But at no time was there, of course, any supposition, nor is there any way that someone can suddenly occupy a land that belongs to the city. One of the reoccurring things that I'm hearing over and over again about is whatever you do, don't do anything here that would otherwise compromise the preservation of the route. Well, that's exactly what we've done here. We have preserved the route should it come through our property. I would say this, that Mr. McMichael's statement that any construction in the area where the possibility of 3132 is going to be should cease. If you look at the study area that was arrived at by the state, federal government, and NLCOG, there are 3 areas that are shown to be considered for the extension of 3132. And let me say this, the one that I think makes a lot of sense and makes the most sense is that one. We're just fine for that to be right there. That makes sense to us. Extending it is fine. But there are others. There was one that extends down and then goes back up through 12 Oaks. There's another one that goes right through all of the improvements there that are going on at Willis Knighton. Frankly, I think it doesn't make sense to me, but it's there. For us to say now, suddenly, let's just freeze all the construction in that area, there wouldn't be anything going on there. I mean, you'd shut down Willis Knighton, you'd shut down 12 Oaks, and I guess you would somehow justify stopping homes from being built in our development. For what reason, I have no idea. There is nothing that stands in the way of that corridor. It is just plainly exhibited there. DOTD has plainly looked at that, and DOTD has plainly permitted it. So I would just say to you that is a reach that I don't think is in anyone's good interest. I know that given the sordid personal past that is between Mr. Stonecipher and Mr. Elrod, that that a lot of those emotions, however regretful they are, drive this, I guess, atmosphere of suspicion and suggesting that there are politics and the like. And in fact, a year ago, last week, I think we were at one of the public meetings. All of these matters have been gone over and over again in public meetings. Volumes of information have been called upon by the government to be produced under this Information Act, which, by the way, only serves to confuse these people more because they get part of a communication, make an assumption, don't know the rest of the story, don't talk to anybody, and why wouldn't you be confused? You don't have the story straight. So I hope that now that we have reached the point where we simply want to pay what we've been using for the last several years, that we can somehow, instead of thinking of all the ways to stop things and to halt and cast dispersions on characters and public officials, that we could somehow seize the process and now begin to find something that we could work together on. And for anyone who wants to work together to build that highway in that place through our land, we're more than willing to do our part to be supportive of that, or any other direction that they may find. But at no time will we ever make a application to this board to build something in that way. Now, the others, the other places are something that you know we don't have any control over. I wanted to. There was a statement several times about state funds. I've been developing for 30 years. I've done several $1 billion worth of development. I'm not bragging about it, but what I will brag about is this: never used one penny of government money in anything we have ever done. We've built it all ourselves. Just delivered $750 million development in Bossier City that just fills the tax coffers. Not one dime of any public money has ever been put there. We have not asked for any public money. We are not building any of this with public money. We are not occupying any public land, and we are asking for nothing that would somehow build something for us, and have never made an application for such.
Mr. Larkin,
Yes,
how are we coming?
Sir?
How are we coming?
Well, I'm trying to make sure that after, that was 45 minutes of objections.
Yes, sir.
Many of them were the same, and I wanted to be sure and cover them. And so, I think that I have addressed most of those. And there was one question about the bridge elevation. I wasn't sure about that, but again, all of our grades are, it's an grade intersection, and there's no conflict whatsoever with that. And certainly, in finality, I know that the Glen, we share the same regard for our relationship with them, and nothing personal with them either. They're our good neighbor. I'm sorry we ever went over and I want to say that we went over and proposed something to them, and looking back, I wish we hadn't, because it's caused them problems, and we just never meant to do that. Everything was on the up and up. And so there's no expectation that we have from them, and we certainly don't in any way wish we would never have caused them yeah, any problems. Are there any questions that I
Mr.
might
Kirkland?
have? Sir?
Mr. Larkin, for the board's consideration and deliberation, I am of the understanding that there is nothing in your agreement with the Railsback property owners that would preclude your building homes in your Esplanade development. It is simply that entry-exit is limited only to your Esplanade residents and the Railsback owners. If my understanding is correct on that, if you were to be willing to accept a delay on this alignment you propose today, and then use that entry-exit for the next year or so, how much of a handicap, and I understand there's a step that the MPC would have to modify if that were an acceptable agreement, but would that help you to get started with what you, I think, want to do, which is build homes in your Esplanade development?
Well, here is, I think that, I think you can have your cake and eat it too. Number one, we every single day, we have trucks and deliveries and people coming and going from the Flournoy Lucas end of this project.
But you would still have that road for construction materials and traffic. Nothing would limit that. It just would not be the public entry-exit until the study is complete. I'm just throwing that out as not knowing where the board's going to go when they get into deliberations today as an option that has not been discussed. And it would allow you, though, the right to, once the step were modified, the zoning step, it would allow you to get building permits and start building homes in your Esplanade development.
Well, I would leave that to the board, but I'll say this, that the intent that we have here is really one exclusive thing. We have an all-weather road right now that we deliver materials to, and soon we will have individuals that would like to use that road to access our development. And it's just that simple. What we intend to do is to pave that road, and what we would hope that would do is that would satisfy your covenant. Regardless, it's necessary that we pave the road just because our people expect that. And so I'm not seeing where there would be an objection to continuing to use the road, and we're paving the road at our own expense, and so we expose ourselves to whatever the future might hold on that. And so, in addition to that, if there is something that the board wants to visit, well, so be it. At any rate, we'll always deliver our materials from that end, and that's why we have built the road the way it is, and that's why we built the bridge the way it is. Right. And then that is why we went through all of this with DOTD and got their concurrence before we made these plans. Right. So, does that make sense?
All right, Mr. Larkin, anything else?
No, sir. No.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe there have been several organization names called here this afternoon in reference to this discussion. Larry?
One quick question. Is that a representative from the Department of Transportation or NLCOG in the audience? Who you with?
NLCOG.
Western Louisiana Council of Governments.
What about DOTD? Come speak. Nobody from DOTD? Who we want to hear from them?
That's your pleasure.
Can you come forward and state your name and address like everybody else? And
Good thinking, Larry.
Yeah, my name is Chris Petro. I live at 307 Tealwood Drive, Bossier City, and really what I want to bring to the table today is that there were some questions about some of the access concerning that, and our official stance on that is, if I may
Chris, you may want to read it.
Okay.
So we got that.
There's some questions about the access and who approves what. NOCOG does not have any purview over the access on this state highway. In fact, we don't review or approve any or grant any type of access to Fort Moore Lucas in any way, shape, or form, and we leave that to the local jurisdiction who is in charge of the maintenance and the facility. And in this case, it would be DOTD. So other than that, it's really I could give you an update on the stage 0 feasibility study and where we're at right there as far as that's concerned. Right now, Bert Kleinpeter, the consultant that's performing the feasibility study, the stage 0 study for this particular project, they've done all their analysis, data collection out in the field along 410 Lucas. Done some preliminary environmental work, done preliminary traffic analysis work, and they've turned over those results as well as some preliminary design, line, and grade stuff for some of the 3 alternatives that will be pushed forward and presented to the public once it receives review and approval by DOTD headquarters. So we're actually at this point right here. And that should be forthcoming pretty soon. We anticipate the completion of the feasibility study to occur June this year, and then we'll move forward into a formal NEPA process, a stage 1 environmental study, and we already are in the process of procuring or putting under contract an environmental consultant to perform those tasks. So we're going to roll right into the. Yes, sir, Mr. Ferdinand.
No, I'm just saying, with all this going on, that's what several of the comments were along the line of this going on and still and all so on. That's why I was hoping somebody from the Department of Transportation here to kind of address what was that Dr. Kostalka said relative to nothing's going to negatively impact the 3132 route. However, this study is not even complete yet. So he's saying that without knowing the results of it.
Right, that's correct. Right. There will be 3.
You want to address that?
I don't think
plead
I
the
can
fifth. That's
speak
okay.
for-
I'll let you plead the fifth. Okay.
I don't think I can speak for Dr. Calavoda, but there are 3. There are going to be 3 alternatives that are considered feasible to be pushed forward into the environmental study. And at the beginning of the environmental study, we're planning on having 3 public meetings to to gather input when we go into the formal environmental process. That's what's considered a formal environmental study.
All right.
Yes, sir. Let me get you to clarify. I think I'm now part of the confused group. When we were at some of the early meetings, what we were told is that there were 3 corridors that would be studied under a stage 0, which was a feasibility study, which included a 4th option, which is no build.
Yes, sir.
And at the end of the stage 0, they would come back and say either 1 corridor is feasible, or 2 are feasible, or all 3 are feasible, or no corridors are feasible and it's a no build. Are you telling me that all 3 corridors will go through to the environmental?
No.
So we still don't know if this is a.
No, there's going to be a couple of them eliminated. So as far as going forward.
So as far as what's on the table today, no build is still on the table today?
Yes, sir. And it has to be in the environmental, the stage 1 process has to include a no build. We have to abide by their rules, the federal government.
So by the end of this summer, when the stage 1 is completed, there may only be 1 corridor that's deemed feasible. So this whole discussion may come down to a single corridor that's going to be considered.
Well, at the completion of the stage, the environmental study, there will be just 1 preferred corridor selected.
And that process is is that the one this
18
summer?
months. Yeah, it'll start this month. It'll start at the completion of the feasibility study.
Okay.
So it'll be another 18 months post the completion, and we're ready to roll on that one.
Okay, thank you.
You had your hand up?
Oh, no,
Mr.
Dr. Wilson.
Mr. Kirkland had one, and I'll come
Go
back.
ahead.
Yes, sir.
Chris, in these type of studies that are being done, how wide is the corridor typically that's selected? Isn't that around 400 feet or so, or?
Yeah, at the completion of the environmental, the stage one study, you'll have an alignment that's set at typically 300 feet.
300 feet?
Footprint. Right now, at the feasibility level, it's about a mile.
Yeah.
Around, about 5,000 feet, something like that.
Right. So
they're very conceptual at this point.
So by mid-year next year, if things go well, we would know which corridor or two were being looked at. Is that correct?
We'll know which one's going to be preferred by next year.
And if it happens to be just one, which is within the purview of what the consultant's doing, that even further defines for the community where the likelihood, if it's a build alternative, is likely to go.
Right. Yeah, let me clarify something about, you know, when you see all these lines on the maps, and there's a lot of confusion out there to the public, and it's part our fault as far as NOCAL getting the information out to the public. When we do our long-range transportation plan update, that document, those lines on those maps are just graphic, illustrative. I mean, they are very conceptual in nature. You cannot set an engineering specified alignment off of those lines on that map. That isn't what they're there for. They're just put in the plan as a placeholder to determine conceptually where you want to get from point A to point B with that improvement project in the long range. That's really all. That's where a lot of the confusion lies, I believe.
Dr. Wilson?
Just answer my question.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to know, how far had you gotten on giving a definite direction, or a definite line? And when you said all these little lines that we see, which we don't understand, would not be the main thing that we'd be reading. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, they're in our long-range plan document. It's all conceptual.
Thank you.
Larry?
Will NLCOG be handling the purchasing of the right-of-way, and if so, when?
No, sir.
No.
It's left to the.
That's state.
It's a
That's
state.
state?
It's a state function.
Absolutely.
So you wouldn't know, it'd be all the state.
Ladies and gentlemen?
And in fact, just to follow up on that, you can't purchase right away if you want our federal partners to participate funding-wise until you have a record of decision on that alignment, which means you have to get through the stage one process to identify that it's met all the environmental scrutiny, and then you can purchase right away. Otherwise, the federal highway folks will not participate, will not fund the project.
All right, any other comments? Sir, thank you very much for coming forward. All right, for the benefit of the record, ladies and gentlemen, what we'd love to be able to do, Mr. Stevens, if you'll help us with this head count, those of you who are in opposition of this particular case being approved, would you please stand and remain standing until we get a count?
They're in opposition.
That's from the five.
Mr. Chairman, it might be easier if we had those stand who didn't care. Almost entire room.
Got it.
You got
I asked Mr. Jean to count. I got 55. We're good?
Right.
All right. And compare notes, all right?
Hey, Joe, you better watch who you're standing by. How many?
All right, we're good?
Yeah.
A room full.
All right, you may be seated. Those of you who are in favor of this, in fairness, in favor of this case being approved, would you please stand?
That's easy. That's good. That was easy.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. All right. We would invite those of you who are present to stay with us if you choose to. If there is any point in time you decide that you're wanting to leave and not to hear the rest of this, we'll stop at this time and allow you to exit. Otherwise, we invite you to stay because we've got some very important other topics that we feel like you'd be interested in.
Hey, Woody, you gotta stay.
I would love to have some blonde and sweet.
Right, right. Hey, Bradford. How you doing, guy? How you been doing? Good to see you, sir. Well, I'm gonna take a little break back to the line.
Yes, sir. That's what I'm fasting.
Leave quietly, did you?
I'm sorry?
Should have told them leave quietly.
Yeah, I should have, but that's asking a lot of sugar for a dime.
Just going to point out.
Reverend, that's why my pastor and I disagree sometimes.
Okay, so right now,
Pursue that rails back thing.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was already thinking. I thought it was just say, Blythe, we done the temporary road.
that's what I was gonna say.
And the temporary road. Stuck out in your houses and coming over. I'm gonna step out down the hall.
But it wouldn't block any of the 3132, would it, his building?
Oh, we're not giving him any kind of, he's got a temporary